Jasmine Wright's trembling fingers barely held her phone as the entire cabin fell silent. The flight attendant who had just screamed in her face now stood frozen, her smug expression melting into shock as the plane's intercom crackled to life. "This is your captain speaking. We've just received orders to return to the gate immediately." Tears streamed down Jasmine's dark cheeks, but a small, determined smile formed on her lips. What had begun as a dream trip to visit Stanford University had just become a national incident that would change airline policy forever. How could one 17-year-old girl bring an entire commercial flight to a standstill? Before we dive into this shocking story of discrimination at 30,000 feet, let me know where you're watching from. If you believe in justice for all and standing up against discrimination, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of courage in the face of prejudice. Your support helps us share these important messages with the world. Jasmine Wright had always been exceptional. Growing up in South Chicago's rougher neighborhoods hadn't dimmed her brilliance or determination. At 17, her bedroom walls were plastered with medical diagrams and neuroscience articles instead of pop stars. Her dream of becoming a neurosurgeon wasn't just a childhood fantasy, but a meticulously planned future with color-coded study schedules and volunteer hours at the local hospital. When the envelope from the Preston Foundation's elite university tour program arrived, Jasmine stared at it for 20 minutes before finding the courage to open it. Only 50 students nationwide received this prestigious scholarship each year. The program flew promising low-income students to visit America's top universities, all expenses paid. Stanford University topped Jasmine's list, and now she would actually walk its hallowed grounds. "Baby girl, I always knew you'd make it," her grandmother Eloise exclaimed, her weathered hands framing Jasmine's face. "Your grandfather would have been so proud to see this day." The elderly woman's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Kiana Wright worked double shifts as a hospital administrator and weekend receptionist at a law firm to keep the lights on. When Jasmine shared the news, her mother collapsed into the worn kitchen chair. "Thank God someone sees what I've always known about you," she whispered. "You're meant for greatness." The night before departure, Jasmine couldn't sleep. Her carefully packed suitcase stood by the door, containing her prized possession, a crimson Stanford sweatshirt purchased from a thrift store years ago. Some nights, she'd worn it while studying, as if its very fabric contained the essence of her dreams. At O'Hare International Airport, Kiana hugged her daughter fiercely. "Remember, you belong in any room you enter. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." The first hint of trouble came at security. While white passengers moved swiftly through the line, the TSA agent waved Jasmine aside. "Random additional screening," he muttered without making eye contact. She endured the extra pat-down and bag search, keeping her expression neutral despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "Jasmine, is that you?" A blonde girl bounced toward her, bypassing security with barely a glance from the agents. Tessa Morgan attended a private school across town and had also been selected for the university tour. They'd met briefly at the Easy Eye orientation meeting. "Isn't this exciting? First class and everything." Jasmine nodded, forcing a smile while gathering her belongings. She noticed how nobody had randomly selected Tessa for additional screening. Boarding the plane felt surreal. Jasmine had never flown before, and her scholarship package included a first-class ticket. She found her seat, 3A, a window position with generous legroom. As she settled in, she felt eyes on her. A senior flight attendant with a nameplate reading, Veronica Harlow, paused mid-stride, her gaze flickering between Jasmine and the first-class seat. "Boarding pass?" Veronica's tone suggested Jasmine had wandered into the wrong section. Jasmine produced the document from her meticulously organized travel folder. Veronica examined it longer than necessary, lips pursed. "First time in first class?" The question carried an unmistakable edge. "First time flying," Jasmine answered honestly. Something like satisfaction flashed across Veronica's face. "Well, try not to touch too many things." Before Jasmine could respond, another flight attendant approached. His nameplate read, Miguel Ramirez, and his smile seemed genuine. "Welcome aboard. First flight ever? That's exciting," he said warmly. "I'll make sure you have everything you need." We're honored to have a future Stanford student with us today. He nodded approvingly at her sweatshirt. The momentary relief Jasmine felt disappeared when Veronica returned with water for pre-flight service. As she leaned over to place Jasmine's cup on the tray table, her hand slipped, sending water cascading onto Jasmine's lap where her Stanford acceptance and itinerary documents lay. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Veronica said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "First-time flyers make me nervous." Jasmine scrambled to save her damp papers, her dream trip already turning into something entirely different than she had imagined. As passengers continued boarding, Veronica made 3 separate passes by Jasmine's seat, each time checking her boarding pass with thinly veiled skepticism. "Just making sure you're in the right place," she'd say loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Jasmine sat rigidly, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. "Never let them see you sweat." Tessa settled into her seat across the aisle, oblivious to the tension. "I can't believe we'll be at Stanford in a few hours. My dad says their bioengineering program is impossible to get into, but I think I have a shot," she continued, chattering about her family's connections while scrolling through social media. Jasmine nodded politely, trying to focus on the positive. The plane was preparing for takeoff, and despite Veronica's hostility, she was actually flying for the first time. As the engines roared to life, Jasmine gripped the armrests, a mixture of excitement and anxiety flooding her system. Once they reached cruising altitude, the beverage service began. Miguel started from the front, while Veronica worked from the middle of first class. Jasmine watched as Veronica served every passenger in her section, except her. When Jasmine's row should have been served, Veronica simply stepped past without acknowledgement. After completing her section, Veronica walked by again with an empty cart. Gathering her courage, Jasmine raised her hand slightly. "Excuse me, could I have a cranberry juice, please?" Veronica stopped, her expression hardening. "I must have missed you," she said, not bothering to sound sincere. Then, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, she added, "Some people just don't seem to understand how things work up here in first class." Heat rushed to Jasmine's face as several passengers turned to look. An elderly white businessman in the row ahead frowned, clearly disapproving of Veronica's tone. "I'm just asking for a beverage like everyone else," Jasmine said quietly. "And now you're arguing with crew instructions," Veronica replied sharply. "I'll have to make a note of that." When Jasmine went to retrieve a tissue from her backpack to dry her still damp documents, the papers spilled onto the floor. Stanford's crimson letterhead was clearly visible as she hurried to gather them. Veronica stopped again. "Those look like important papers. I hope they're not fake credentials. We've had issues with that before." The implication hung heavily in the air. Jasmine's hands trembled with a mixture of anger and humiliation. Discreetly, she pulled out her phone and began recording audio, placing it on her lap beneath the napkin. "I earned my place in this program," she stated calmly, "just like everyone else." Before Veronica could respond, Miguel appeared with a cranberry juice. "Sorry for the wait," he said, placing it carefully on Jasmine's tray. His eyes conveyed an unspoken apology as he glanced at Veronica, who stormed off toward the galley. "Have you ever faced discrimination in a public place where you should have received equal service? Comment number 1 if you believe Jasmine should report Veronica's behavior, or number 2 if you think she should try to avoid further conflict. Don't forget to hit that like button if you admire Jasmine's composure in the face of such blatant disrespect, and subscribe to follow her journey through this shocking incident. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's position? Would you confront the discrimination head-on, or try to endure the flight quietly? And what do you think will happen when these tensions escalate even further at 30,000 feet with nowhere to escape? The situation is about to explode in ways nobody on that flight could have predicted. 2 hours into the flight, Jasmine tried to focus on her university materials despite the stares from nearby passengers. She'd highlighted important details about Stanford's neuroscience program, determined not to let Veronica's behavior ruin this opportunity. The pristine blue sky outside her window reminded her how far she'd come already, both literally and figuratively. Her momentary peace shattered when she needed to use the restroom, Rising quietly, Jasmine made her way toward the first-class lavatory. Veronica materialized as if she'd been waiting, stepping directly into her path. Economy-class lavatories are that way. Veronica gestured toward the back of the plane with a sharp flick of her wrist. Jasmine stood her ground. I'm seated in first class, so I'll use this restroom, please. Her voice remained steady despite her racing heart. These facilities are for regular first-class passengers. Veronica emphasized the word regular with unmistakable meaning. Other passengers were now openly watching the confrontation. An older woman with pearls glanced between them nervously. The businessman who had noticed earlier removed his reading glasses, clearly listening. I am a regular passenger, Jasmine insisted. I have the same ticket as everyone else in this section. Veronica's professional veneer cracked. Listen here, she hissed, her voice rising with each word. I've been working these skies for 23 years, and I know when someone doesn't belong. You're disrespecting my authority, and I won't have it. The outburst silenced nearby conversations. Jasmine noticed Miguel emerging from the galley, concern etched on his face. I've done nothing disrespectful, Jasmine replied, her phone now recording in her hand. I'd just like to use the restroom I'm entitled to use. Veronica's face contorted. You want to record me? That's a federal violation of flight safety. When we land, I'll have security waiting. We'll see how Stanford feels about accepting troublemakers who threaten flight safety. Her voice had escalated to a near shout. As Jasmine finally pushed past to enter the bathroom, Veronica leaned in close to her ear and whispered, People, like you always think you deserve what you haven't earned. The slur that followed was barely audible, but it hit Jasmine like a physical blow. Inside the lavatory, Jasmine's hand shook as she checked her phone. The recording had captured everything except the whispered slur. Tears threatened, but she refused to let them fall. Her mother and grandmother hadn't raised her to break in the face of bigotry. When she emerged, Veronica stood waiting with arms crossed. As Jasmine returned to her seat, the flight attendant followed, announcing loudly to nearby passengers, We have a troublemaker who doesn't understand proper aircraft etiquette. I apologize for any disruption to your premium experience. The businessman who had been watching spoke up. The only disruption I'm experiencing is from your unprofessional behavior, not from this young lady. Veronica ignored him, standing over Jasmine's seat with an outstretched hand. Your phone needs to be confiscated as evidence of your violation of aircraft recording policies. No. Jasmine clutched her phone tightly. There's no such policy against passengers recording their own experiences. Give me that phone now! Veronica lunged forward, attempting to grab it from Jasmine's hands. The businessman stood up in protest as Tessa finally looked up from her magazine, mouth agape at the scene unfolding. Jasmine twisted away, protecting her evidence as Veronica's fingers clawed at her wrist. Stop touching me, she shouted, loud enough that passengers in economy class turned around. Miguel rushed forward, physically inserting himself between them. Veronica, you need to step back right now, he said firmly. She's violating federal regulations, Veronica insisted, her face flushed with anger. No, she isn't, Miguel replied, tersely. Please return to the galley. As Veronica stormed off, whispers rippled through the cabin. Jasmine's heart pounded so hard she felt lightheaded. The situation had escalated beyond anything she could have imagined, and they were still thousands of feet in the air with nowhere to escape. With Veronica temporarily retreated to the galley, Jasmine seized her chance. I need to use the restroom again, she told Miguel quietly, clutching her phone like a lifeline. He nodded understanding. Take your time. Inside the lavatory, Jasmine locked the door and leaned against it, finally allowing herself to tremble. The overhead light cast harsh shadows on her face in the mirror, revealing eyes wide with stress. For a moment, she wondered if she should have just endured the discrimination silently. But no. Her mother and grandmother had always taught her that silence in the face of injustice only perpetuated it. Thankfully, this flight offered Wi-Fi. She connected her phone and opened her messaging app, hands still shaking. The recording needed to be preserved beyond her device in case Veronica somehow managed to take it. She attached the video to a message to her mother. Mom, I'm having a serious problem on the flight. The attendant is discriminating against me and tried to physically take my phone. I'm scared about what will happen when we land. She threatened to have security waiting for me. Please watch this and call Mr. Patterson right away. James Patterson was the civil rights attorney at the law firm where Kiana worked weekends. He'd given Jasmine a congratulatory card when he heard about her scholarship. She hit send and watched anxiously as the progress bar slowly moved across the screen. With airplane Wi-Fi speeds, it felt like an eternity before the confirmation appeared. Message delivered. Almost immediately, her phone lit up with a response. Sending this to JP. Now, stay calm. Document everything. Love you. Jasmine allowed herself a small breath of relief. Her mother understood the severity of the situation immediately. Now she just needed to return to her seat and endure the remainder of the flight without further escalation. When she emerged from the lavatory, Veronica was waiting, arms crossed. Passengers aren't allowed to spend excessive time in the restroom. It's a security concern. I wasn't aware there was a time limit, Jasmine replied evenly, trying to sidestep the flight attendant. Veronica moved to block her path again. You've been nothing but trouble this entire flight. I've informed the captain about your disruptive behavior. Back in Chicago, Kiana Wright's hands trembled as she watched the video her daughter had sent. Then she immediately dialed James Patterson's cell phone, though it was Saturday. JP, I need your help right now. It's about Jasmine. She's being racially harassed on her flight to California. Once he answered, she forwarded him the recording. Patterson's response was immediate and decisive. This is textbook discriminatory treatment. I'm contacting the airline's executive, offices, and the FAA. What's her flight number? Within 20 minutes, calls had been made to the airline's headquarters emergency line, the FAA's Civil Rights Division, and airport authorities in both Chicago and San Francisco. The recording had been sent to all parties as evidence of a civil rights violation occurring in real time. On the plane, Jasmine had just settled back into her seat when the intercom crackled to life. This is your captain speaking. Due to an operational situation, we've been instructed to return to Chicago O'Hare. We apologize for the inconvenience and will provide more information once we're on the ground. A collective groan rose from the passengers. Tessa leaned over. What's happening? Mechanical issues? Jasmine simply shook her head, unsure herself. What exactly her mother and Mr. Patterson had set in motion? The plane banked in a wide arc, officially beginning its return journey. In the galley, Veronica received a call on the crew phone. Her confident expression faltered as she listened. When she hung up, her face had drained of color. She whispered urgently to the other flight attendants, who glanced toward Jasmine with startled expressions. Miguel approached Jasmine's seat. Are you okay? He asked quietly. I will be, she answered, the weight of uncertainty still heavy on her shoulders. The pilot's voice came through again, this time on the crew channel that passengers couldn't hear. Veronica Harlow, please report to the cockpit immediately. Veronica strode down the aisle with forced composure, but Jasmine noticed a slight tremor in her hands. When the flight attendant passed her seat, the look she gave Jasmine contained something new. Fear. The plane is turning around because of you, isn't it? Tessa whispered, finally grasping the situation. Jasmine watched the clouds outside her window. Not because of me, she corrected, because of what was done to me. As the plane descended toward Chicago, Jasmine's single call for help had set in motion events that would ultimately affect not just this flight, but airline policy nationwide. The small act of resistance, refusing to accept discrimination and documenting it, was about to create ripples none of them could yet imagine. The plane touched down at O'Hare with a jolt that matched the tension inside the cabin. Passengers murmured in confusion, checking watches and phones, calculating missed connections and ruined plans. Jasmine sat perfectly still, her stomach knotted, with uncertainty. What would happen now? Ladies and gentlemen, the captain's voice sounded strained over the intercom. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We've been instructed to taxi directly to gate C-17 where ground personnel will provide further information. Tessa leaned across the aisle. Seriously, what's going on? Did you actually get them to turn the plane around? Before Jasmine could respond, Miguel approached. "Miss Wright, I want you to know that I've documented everything I witnessed," he whispered. "Whatever happens next, you're not alone." The plane docked at the gate with a subtle bump. Through the window, Jasmine could see an unusual gathering. On the jetway, airline representatives in suits, airport security, and unmistakably 2 police officers. "This is because of you, isn't it?" a businessman behind her asked, not unkindly. "I saw how that flight attendant treated you. Completely unprofessional." The cabin door opened. First to board was a woman in an airline executive uniform, followed by the police officers. The hushed cabin watched as they conferred briefly with the captain. "Ladies and gentlemen," the executive announced, "we sincerely apologize for this disruption. We've received a serious complaint regarding an incident on this flight, and we need to investigate before proceeding. This will require statements from certain individuals." Veronica emerged from the galley, chin high but complexion ashen. She clearly expected the officers to approach Jasmine. When they turned toward her instead, confusion flickered across her face. "Ms. Harlow, we need you to deplane immediately for questioning," one officer stated. "There must be some mistake," Veronica protested. "That girl was the disruptive passenger. She violated federal regulations by recording—" "Ma'am," the second officer interrupted firmly, "we have received multiple complaints, including video evidence. Please come with us without further disruption." The cabin erupted in hushed conversations. Jasmine felt dozens of eyes on her as tears welled up. Whether from relief or lingering fear, she couldn't tell. The airline executive approached next. "Miss Wright, I'm Catherine Blackwell, Vice President of Customer Experience. On behalf of Trans-American Airlines, I want to personally apologize for your experience today. We'd like you to deplane next, so we can take your statement in a more comfortable environment." As Jasmine gathered her belongings, several first-class passengers spoke up. That attendant was targeting her from the moment she sat down, the elderly businessman stated firmly. "I heard everything," added a woman in a business suit. "No passenger should be treated that way, especially not a young student." The walk down the jetway felt surreal. Outside, Jasmine was shocked to see her mother waiting, alongside a tall man in a suit she recognized as James Patterson. How had they gotten through security so quickly? "Baby!" Kiana rushed forward, embracing her. "Daughter, are you okay?" "Mom, how did you get back here?" Jasmine asked, bewildered. Patterson stepped forward. "The airline issued emergency visitor passes after our legal team made it clear what kind of publicity they'd face if they didn't cooperate fully." He nodded toward a group of people standing just beyond the security checkpoint. "That's just the local news crews. National outlets are calling too." Jasmine followed his gaze and saw camera crews setting up equipment. This was bigger than she could have imagined. Inside a private airline lounge, Catherine Blackwell attempted damage control. "We want to resolve this situation to everyone's satisfaction. Trans-American Airlines has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind." Patterson cut her off. "That policy clearly failed today. My client, a 17-year-old honor student traveling on a prestigious academic scholarship, was harassed, threatened, and physically accosted by your employee. We are investigating and will take appropriate action would be immediate termination of the employee in question, a public apology, and compensation for emotional distress," Patterson countered. Catherine hesitated. "We need to follow proper protocols with our employee union. Then we'll speak with the press waiting outside," Patterson replied smoothly. "They're very interested in the story of how a black teenage girl was so severely harassed that federal authorities ordered your aircraft to return to the gate." 10 minutes later, Jasmine found herself facing a cluster of microphones and cameras. With her mother's arm around her shoulders and Patterson beside her, she took a deep breath. "Today, I was made to feel that I didn't belong in a seat I earned. Through years of hard work and academic achievement," she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I was targeted solely because of the color of my skin. What happened to me isn't unique. It happens to people of color every day in America. The difference is that today, someone was held accountable. As she spoke, more cameras arrived. Behind them, passengers from the flight gathered, many nodding in agreement. Miguel stood among them, still in his uniform despite possible repercussions. Meanwhile, in another room, the airline's PR team frantically drafted a statement. Transamerican is investigating an alleged incident of unprofessional service. We take all passenger concerns seriously and are working to resolve this matter. The word alleged would soon prove to be their first mistake of many. Do you think Jasmine was right to speak publicly about what happened, or should she have tried to resolve it privately with the airline? Comment number 1 if you believe speaking out was the right move, or number 2 if you think a quieter approach might have been better. Hit that like button if you're impressed by Jasmine's courage in standing up against discrimination, and subscribe to see how this young woman's brave stand continues to unfold. What would you have done in Jasmine's position? And how do you think the airline will respond now that this incident is becoming public? The battle is far from over, and powerful forces are about to mobilize against this young woman who dared to challenge systemic discrimination. Will she be able to withstand what comes next? Jasmine Wright became a household name overnight. By Sunday morning, the hashtag #ChocherJasmineDeservesBetter was trending nationwide. Her video had been viewed millions of times, with celebrities and civil rights leaders sharing it alongside personal statements of support. The clip showing Veronica attempting to grab Jasmine's phone was particularly damaging. Media outlets played it on loop, often followed by Jasmine's poised statement at the airport. Her composed eloquence made her an instantly sympathetic figure to many. "This young woman represents the best of America," declared a prominent civil rights leader on a Sunday morning talk show. Brilliant, determined, and unwilling to accept discrimination quietly. But as Jasmine and her mother discovered, viral fame was a double-edged sword. "Breaking news in the airline discrimination case," announced a conservative news anchor. Sources close to Transamerican Airlines suggest the so-called victim may have orchestrated the entire incident for attention. Was this a calculated move by an entitled teen looking for social media fame? In their small apartment, Jasmine watched in disbelief as the anchor questioned her character. "But they have the video," she protested. "Everyone can see what really happened." Kiana turned off the television. "Some people will always twist the truth to fit their narrative. We knew this wouldn't be easy." Patterson called with updates. Transamerican CEO just issued a statement. "It's careful corporate speak. We are taking this matter seriously and conducting a thorough investigation. While we cannot comment on specific personnel matters, Transamerican Airlines has always prided itself on creating an inclusive environment for all passengers." "That doesn't sound like an apology," Jasmine noted. "It's not," Patterson confirmed. "They're playing for time, hoping this blows over." It wouldn't blow over. By Monday morning, protesters gathered outside Transamerican's headquarters in Dallas. Online, the airline's social media accounts were flooded with angry comments and boycott threats. Then came the first serious pushback. The flight attendants union released a statement defending Veronica without naming her. "Our member has served faithfully for over 20 years with a spotless record. We stand by all aviation professionals who maintain order and safety aboard aircraft, often in challenging circumstances. We urge the public to reserve judgment until all facts are known." Jasmine's phone pinged with a notification from the Preston Foundation, which had awarded her the University Tour Scholarship. "In light of recent events and the associated publicity, we need to discuss your continued participation in the program. Please call at your earliest convenience." Her heart sank. "Mom, they might take away my scholarship." Kiana's expression hardened. "Over my dead body. Call Patterson right now." At school the next day, Jasmine felt the weight of sudden notoriety. Some teachers expressed quiet support with encouraging smiles or gentle squeezes of her shoulder. Others seemed coldly distant, as if her stand against discrimination was itself disruptive. "My dad says you should have just followed the flight attendant's instructions," one classmate told her in the hallway. "He's a pilot and says passengers who don't listen make flying dangerous for everyone." "But I didn't break any rules," Jasmine protested. "Whatever," the girl shrugged. "He says people are always playing the race card. Jasmine retreated to the library for lunch, unable to face the cafeteria's whispers and stares. She opened her laptop to work on homework and flinched at what she found online. Anonymous accounts were sharing edited clips of her airport statement, manipulated to make her sound arrogant and entitled. Comment sections overflowed with vitriol, another professional victim looking for a payday, and what really happened is this girl didn't belong in first class and couldn't handle being called out. Worse were the messages trying to expose personal details about her family. Mother works 2 jobs, probably can't even afford rent in Chicago. Where'd they get Stanford sweatshirt money? That evening, a local news van parked outside their apartment building. Neighbors complained to the landlord about the disruption, some pointedly asking how long the situation would continue. The Preston Foundation called again. While we applaud standing up for one's rights, the program aims to provide opportunities, not generate controversy. Several university admissions officers have expressed concerns about your ability to represent the foundation appropriately. When she hung up, Jasmine found her grandmother sitting at the kitchen table, looking pale. "Grandma, are you okay?" she asked, alarmed. "Just a little chest pain," Eloise admitted. "All this stress isn't good for my heart. These news vans outside, people calling the house, saying terrible things." That night, Jasmine overheard her mother on the phone with Patterson. "They're trying to wear us down," Kiana said quietly. "My coworkers are divided. Some support us completely, others think I'm causing problems for the firm. And now Mom's health." Patterson's response was grave. "Their legal team contacted me today. They're filing a motion to suppress the full video, claiming it violates aviation privacy laws. And they're suggesting they might pursue a countersuit for defamation and business interference if we don't settle quickly with an NDA. Can they do that?" "They can try," Patterson replied. "They have deep pockets and an incentive to make this disappear. But I'm taking your case pro bono and I'm bringing in colleagues who specialize in civil rights litigation. This is bigger than one flight attendant or even one airline." When Jasmine went to bed that night, her phone buzzed with a text from a Stanford admissions officer. "Stay strong. We see you. This changes nothing about your academic potential." It was a small victory in what was rapidly becoming a much larger battle than she'd ever anticipated. 6 days after the flight incident, Trans-American Airlines CEO Richard Whitfield appeared on a business news program. Impeccably dressed in a navy suit with the airline's pin on his lapel, he projected calm authority. "While we take all passenger complaints seriously," he stated, looking directly into the camera, "we must also consider the safety of all our customers and the challenging environments our crew members navigate daily." The interviewer leaned forward. "Are you suggesting Jasmine Wright posed a safety threat?" "What I'm saying is that maintaining order at 30,000 feet is critical. Our preliminary investigation indicates this was a case of a disruptive passenger who refused to comply with crew member instructions, then selectively edited footage to create a false narrative." Kiana threw a cushion at the television. "He's lying. They have the complete video." Patterson called immediately. "Don't worry. This desperate move only helps our case. They're trying to control the narrative because they're scared." But the CEO's interview marked a turning point. Tabloid websites suddenly featured stories with headlines like, "Jasmine Wright, honor student or troublemaker. Sources reveal previous school incidents." The incident they'd uncovered was from Jasmine's freshman year, when she'd challenged a teacher who suggested that certain communities didn't value education after several students performed poorly on a test. Jasmine had been sent to the principal's office for disrupting class, but was later vindicated when other students confirmed the teacher's inappropriate remarks. Now this minor event was being twisted into evidence of a pattern of confrontational behavior. The pressure intensified at home. Reporters camped outside their apartment building around the clock. Neighbors left anonymous notes complaining about the disruption. One morning, they found their car tires slashed, with no witnesses willing to come forward. Eloise's health deteriorated under the stress. After finding her grandmother struggling to breathe one evening, Jasmine called 911. At the hospital, doctors diagnosed an anxiety-induced cardiac event. "She needs rest and calm," the doctor advised. "This level of stress could trigger a more serious episode." Kiana made arrangements for Eloise to stay with her sister in Milwaukee, away from the media circus. As they helped her pack, Eloise gripped Jasmine's hand. "Don't you dare back down," the elderly woman insisted, her voice weak but determined. "Your grandfather marched with Dr. King. Our family doesn't bend to injustice." At school, the administration called Jasmine into a meeting. The principal spoke with careful neutrality. "Given the disruption to the learning environment, we think it might be best for you to complete the semester remotely." "You're punishing me for being discriminated against?" Jasmine asked incredulously. "We're not punishing you. We're trying to minimize distractions for all students." "The distraction isn't me," Jasmine countered. "It's the media outside and the fact that some people can't handle discussions about racism." Despite her protests, the administration stood firm. Jasmine found herself effectively suspended, receiving assignments via email instead of attending classes. Meanwhile, Patterson brought troubling news. "The airline has produced 3 passengers willing to testify that you were argumentative from the beginning and that Veronica was merely doing her job." "That's impossible," Jasmine protested. "The video shows exactly what happened. One is a frequent flyer with elite status who gets special perks from the airline. Another is a former trans-American employee. The third refuses to be identified until the hearing." More concerning was the impact on Kiana's employment. Her supervisor at the law firm called her in for a private conversation. "The partners are concerned about the appearance of conflict of interest," he explained uncomfortably. "With your daughter's case potentially involving some of our corporate clients, we need to place you on administrative leave until this resolves." With her main source of income suspended and her weekend receptionist job insufficient to cover bills, financial pressure mounted alongside everything else. The airline's legal team filed the threatened countersuit, claiming Jasmine and her mother had engaged in a coordinated campaign to damage trans-Americans' reputation through false allegations of discrimination, resulting in millions in lost bookings and stock devaluation. Local businesses began taking sides. The coffee shop where Jasmine had studied for years suddenly claimed to have no tables available when she arrived. Meanwhile, a nearby bookstore displayed a handmade, "Honchard Jasmine Deserves Better" sign in their window. Even Miguel, the supportive flight attendant, faced consequences. He called Jasmine from a blocked number. "They've grounded me pending investigation for failure to follow proper reporting procedures," he explained. "My union rep says if I continue supporting your version of events, I could lose my job and my pension. I have 3 kids and a mortgage." His voice trailed off, the implied dilemma clear. Jasmine couldn't bring herself to ask him to sacrifice his family's security, even for the truth. As public attention began to shift to newer controversies, Trans-American strategy appeared to be working. Wear down the opposition, apply pressure, from multiple angles, and eventually, Jasmine and her mother would be forced to settle quietly. What they hadn't counted on was Jasmine's determination. Each night, she documented everything in a journal, creating a record of the systematic attempt to silence her. Between remote schoolwork and hospital visits to her grandmother, she researched similar cases, reaching out to others who had fought corporate giants. "They think we'll break," she told her mother one night. "They're wrong." 3 weeks after the flight incident, Jasmine and Kiana sat in Patterson's office reviewing the airline's latest legal maneuver. Trans-American had expanded their countersuit, now claiming business interference and defamation with damages set at $2.3 million, an astronomically punitive amount designed to intimidate. "They know you don't have this kind of money," Patterson explained. "It's a pressure tactic to force a settlement with a non-disclosure agreement." Kiana massaged her temples. "So they discriminate against my daughter, then sue us for talking about it? Welcome to corporate America," Patterson sighed. "They've also filed for an emergency injunction to prevent any further public statements while litigation is pending." The financial strain was becoming unbearable. With Kiana still on unpaid leave and her weekend job insufficient to cover bills, they'd fallen behind on rent. Their landlord, initially sympathetic, was now threatening eviction. "We've received support offers from several civil rights organizations," Patterson noted. "They can help with living expenses while we fight this." What's the catch? Kiana asked warily. No catch, but accepting makes this a more public civil rights case rather than just a personal grievance. The airline will claim you're being used as a pawn by activist groups. On their way home, they stopped at a convenience store where they regularly shopped. The owner, who had always been friendly, suddenly turned cold. We don't want any trouble here, he said, pointing to a newly posted sign. Right to refuse service to anyone. You're refusing to sell us groceries? Kiana asked incredulously. My business can't afford boycotts. Some customers threatened to stop coming if I serve those troublemakers suing American businesses. Their community was fracturing along ideological lines. While some neighbors brought home-cooked meals and offered rides since their car tires had been slashed, others crossed the street to avoid them. Jasmine's former school friends mostly disappeared, their parents wary of association with controversy. Local politicians entered the fray. A city councilman from a wealthy district gave interviews questioning why a disruptive incident on an airplane was being inflated into a racial crisis. This victim mentality damages our city's reputation and divides communities, he claimed. If the rights truly face discrimination, let the courts handle it privately rather than turning it into a media spectacle. The courts themselves seemed stacked against them. Their case was assigned to Judge William Hargrove, known for being deferential to corporate interests. His first ruling granted Transamerican's motion to seal certain evidence, including parts of the video, citing aviation security concerns. Even their legal team faced pressure. Patterson received calls from major clients hinting they might need to re-evaluate their representation if his firm continued the case against Transamerican. Corporate law is an incestuous business, he admitted to Kiana. Everyone has relationships with everyone else. Right now we're rattling a lot of cages. Meanwhile, Miguel Ramirez, the supportive flight attendant, faced an impossible choice. Transamerican management made it clear that his continued employment depended on signing an affidavit supporting the company's version of events. I have 3 kids, a mortgage, and 20 years invested in my pension, he told Jasmine during a furtive phone call. If I stand by what really happened, I lose everything. I understand, Jasmine assured him, heart sinking. Another witness slipping away. The pressure extended to Jasmine's education. Her grades suffered as she struggled to keep up with remote learning while managing the case and family crisis. Panic attacks disrupted her sleep, leaving her exhausted during the day. The Preston Foundation officially suspended her participation in the university tour program, citing behavioral concerns based on the airline's accusations. Just when things seemed darkest, a single email arrived from Stanford University. An admissions officer wrote, "While we cannot comment on ongoing legal matters, Stanford values students who demonstrate moral courage and a commitment to truth. Your academic record speaks for itself, and recent events have only highlighted character qualities we seek in future leaders. Your place in the admissions process remains secure." This small vote of confidence provided a desperately needed boost. That same day, 3 major civil rights organizations announced a joint legal defense fund for the Wright family, with prominent attorneys volunteering to join Patterson's team pro bono. Transamerican Airlines responded by escalating further. Their private investigators began following Jasmine and Kiana, photographing them in public and interviewing acquaintances about their personal lives. "They're looking for anything to discredit you," Patterson warned. "An angry outburst in public, an old social media post, past mistakes, anything to shift the narrative from discrimination to your character." The strategy became clear when a conservative blog published photos of Jasmine at a school dance the previous year, wearing an expensive-looking dress. The accompanying article questioned how a family claiming financial hardship could afford luxury items and suggested their poverty narrative was manufactured. They didn't mention that the dress was borrowed from a wealthier friend, or that Jasmine had worked part-time tutoring jobs throughout high school to contribute to household expenses. "They're trying to portray us as frauds," Kiana realized, "make people think we're gaming the system for money." By controlling the narrative and applying pressure from multiple angles, legal, financial, community, educational, Transamerican's strategy aimed to exhaust the rights into submission. It was working. Each day brought new challenges, new accusations, new forms of isolation. What began as a stand against one discriminatory flight attendant had evolved into a battle against an entire system designed to protect corporate interests at all costs. Do you think big corporations should be able to use their resources to pressure individuals into silence? Comment number 1. If you believe we need stronger protections for people who speak out against discrimination. Or number 2. If you think companies have the right to defend their reputation aggressively. Don't forget to like this video if you're inspired by Jasmine's perseverance against overwhelming odds, and subscribe to follow the conclusion of this shocking story. What would you do if faced with this kind of systematic pressure to give up your principles? How far would you go to stand up for what's right when powerful forces are aligned against you? And just when it seems the rights have no path to victory, an unexpected ally is about to emerge from within the airline itself. Someone, with evidence that could change everything. On a rainy Tuesday morning, 42 days after the flight incident, Patterson received an anonymous email. The subject line read simply, Right v. Trans-American, confidential information. I need to meet in person. I have evidence. That will help Jasmine write. Not comfortable sharing electronically. Will only speak with attorney directly. The message came from a temporary email address with no identifying information. Patterson replied, suggesting a meeting at a quiet coffee shop across town. Bring only Jasmine and her mother, the response stated. No other attorneys. I'm risking everything by doing this. Patterson called Kiana immediately. It could be a trap, he warned. Someone trying to get you to violate the gag order or gathering material for their case. Or it could be legitimate, Kiana countered. We're running out of options. I think we should go. The following afternoon, they sat in the back corner of a nearly empty cafe. A middle-aged man in an unmarked baseball cap and sunglasses approached cautiously, scanning for anyone watching. Once seated, he removed his disguise. My name is David Chen. I'm a first officer, co-pilot, with Trans-American. You were on Jasmine's flight? Patterson asked. Chen shook his head. No, but I have access to information you need. He placed a thumb drive on the table, covering it with his hand. This contains evidence that Trans-American has systematically covered up discrimination complaints against Veronica Harlow for years. Why are you helping us? Kiana asked cautiously. Because what happened to your daughter wasn't an isolated incident. Chen's expression darkened. 3 years ago, my sister had a similar experience with Harlow. She filed a complaint that disappeared into the corporate void. When I investigated internally, I discovered dozens of complaints against this same flight attendant, all from passengers of color, all buried by management. He pushed the thumb drive across the table. This includes cockpit voice recordings where Harlow made racist comments to crew members, internal emails discussing passenger complaints, and spreadsheets tracking incident reports by passenger demographics, data. They're deliberately hiding from your legal team. This could be career suicide for you, Patterson observed. Chen nodded grimly. 24 years with the airline. Pension, healthcare, everything gone if they identify me as the leak. He looked directly at Jasmine. But my teenage niece asked. Be something I couldn't answer. Uncle David, if you know something wrong is happening and you do nothing, aren't you part of the problem? Patterson examined the drive without connecting it. Why didn't you come forward sooner? I needed time to gather everything safely. They've been scrubbing records since your case went public, deleting emails, modifying complaint logs. I had to access archived backups, which required careful timing to avoid detection. He slid a paper across the table. This is the most damning evidence. 3 months ago, Harlow was actually terminated by HR after accumulating too many verified complaints. Then a VP overruled the decision because her husband is a major shareholder. They not only reinstated her, but promoted her to senior cabin crew and assigned her exclusively to premium routes. The documents revealed a shocking pattern. Veronica Harlow had been the subject of 73 passenger complaints over 5 years, with 68 coming from passengers of color. Responses to white passengers' complaints were prompt and apologetic, while identical complaints from minority passengers were classified as passenger misunderstanding or unsubstantiated perception issues. Most disturbing was an internal email from a mid-level manager to human resources. While VH's customer approach may be problematic with certain demographics, her strict adherence to company policies maintains our premium cabin standards. Some passengers may interpret her enforcement of standards as discriminatory when they're simply unaccustomed to first-class protocols. This is textbook discrimination, Patterson breathed, reviewing the files. They're not just ignoring complaints. They're institutionalizing prejudice under the guise of standards. Chen checked his watch nervously. There's more. After Jasmine's incident went viral, an emergency executive meeting was called. I've included the minutes. They explicitly discussed handling this as a PR problem, not a conduct problem. They never intended to investigate fairly. They were strategizing damage control from the first moment. As their meeting concluded, Chen replaced his disguise. One last thing. They know Miguel Ramirez supported Jasmine's account initially. They've been threatening his family's health care if he doesn't recant. His daughter has chronic asthma and needs regular treatments. Why would you risk everything for us? Jasmine asked quietly. Chen paused. Because systems only change when brave people force them to. You stood up when most would have stayed silent. He slid a business card across the table with a name handwritten on the back. This is Anthony Diaz, an FAA safety inspector I trust. Contact him directly with this evidence. As Chen left, Kiana turned to Patterson. Can we use this legally if it was obtained without authorization? The whistleblower protections might apply to him, but we need to be careful how we introduce this evidence. Patterson's expression was thoughtful. However, now we know exactly what to request in discovery. Specific documents we can prove exist. For the first time in weeks, Jasmine felt a glimmer of hope. The system designed to silence her had cracks, and through those cracks, truth was beginning to emerge. The Department of Transportation hearing room fell silent as Jasmine Wright approached the witness stand. After weeks of legal maneuvering, Transamerican's attempts to keep the case in private arbitration had failed. The DOT's Civil Rights Division had exercised its authority to investigate discriminatory practices in air transportation, bringing the dispute into the public domain. Television cameras lined the back wall, broadcasting the proceedings nationwide. At the respondents' table sat Richard Whitfield, Transamerican CEO, flanked by an imposing team of corporate attorneys. Veronica Harlow sat slightly apart, her expression unreadable. Board Chairwoman Eleanor Washington began the proceedings. This hearing will examine allegations of discriminatory treatment aboard Transamerican Airlines Flight 1382 on April 15th and related corporate practices regarding passenger treatment and complaint resolution. Jasmine's testimony came first. Under Patterson's careful guidance, she recounted every detail of the flight, from the first suspicious glances to the final confrontation. Her voice remained steady, though occasionally she paused to control her emotions. When she grabbed for my phone, I was truly frightened, Jasmine explained. I wasn't just a passenger anymore. I felt like a target. The airline's lead attorney, Spencer Hamilton, began his cross-examination with practiced cordiality that quickly sharpened. Miss Wright, isn't it true that you were unfamiliar with first-class protocols? That perhaps you misinterpreted standard service procedures as personal affronts? I was unfamiliar with flying, not with how people should treat each other, Jasmine replied, earning murmurs of approval from spectators. Hamilton pressed harder. Witnesses state you were argumentative when asked to follow crew instructions. Isn't it possible your preconceived expectations about how you would be treated affected your perception of events? Patterson objected. Counsel is asking my client to speculate about others' motivations while ignoring documented evidence of discriminatory treatment. Throughout the questioning, Jasmine maintained her composure, a stark contrast to the next witness, Veronica. Harlow took the stand with confident indignation that quickly deteriorated under questioning. I've served passengers of all backgrounds for 23 years, she insisted. This isn't about race. It's about maintaining standards and following proper procedures. When Patterson presented her with documentation of her complaint history, specifically the racial disparity in passenger complaints, Harlow grew defensive. Those complaints were investigated and dismissed, she argued. Today's entitled youth think any enforcement of rules is discrimination. They want special treatment, not equality. Special treatment, Patterson repeated thoughtfully. Like being served beverages? Like using the restroom designated for their ticketed cabin? Are these special privileges or basic services all passengers deserve? Harlow's composure cracked further when Patterson played the complete, unedited video from Jasmine's phone. Seeing her own behavior displayed publicly, she shifted blame to airline policies. We're trained to identify passengers who might disrupt the premium experience. Management emphasizes maintaining certain standards in first class. What specific standards was Miss Wright failing to meet? Patterson pressed. Harlow hesitated too long. She seemed uncomfortable with the service protocols. Uncomfortable because she was being denied service available to every other passenger, Patterson clarified. The hearing's dynamic shifted dramatically when Patterson called his expert witnesses. Aviation psychologist Dr. Lenora Jefferson presented research on implicit bias in customer service environments. Transportation equity specialist Marcus Wong shared statistical analyses of discrimination complaints across major airlines, positioning Transamerican as an industry outlier. But the most devastating testimony came from Anthony Diaz, the FAA inspector Chen had recommended. Using the whistleblower evidence as an investigative roadmap, Diaz had conducted an official audit of Transamerican's complaint resolution processes. Our investigation revealed systematic disparities in how passenger complaints were categorized and addressed, based on the complainant's perceived race or ethnicity, Diaz testified. Transamerican's internal tracking system actually included a hidden flag for passenger credibility that correlated closely with demographic information. When CEO Richard Whitfield took the stand, his carefully cultivated public persona showed strain. What had been planned as a display of corporate leadership became an exercise in damage control as Patterson methodically presented evidence of executive knowledge of discriminatory practices. Mr. Whitfield, this email from your Vice President of Cabin Services dated 18 months ago explicitly acknowledges ongoing issues with flight attendant Harlow's interactions with minority passengers. Yet her next performance review recommends her for premium routes. How do you explain this contradiction? Whitfield's response was corporate doublespeak. Without full context, isolated communications can be misinterpreted. Our commitment to inclusive service is outlined in our mission statement and training materials. I'm not asking about mission statements, Patterson countered. I'm asking why an employee with documented discrimination complaints was promoted rather than disciplined. Outside the hearing room, public sentiment was shifting. Protesters gathered daily outside Transamerican headquarters. The company's stock dropped 15% as investors worried about potential doughty fines and damage to the brand. Industry publications ran features questioning whether the case revealed broader problems across commercial aviation. Inside the Wright household, however, the stress remained crushing. Kiana had been forced to take a predatory high-interest loan to avoid eviction. Eloise remained in Milwaukee, her health too fragile to withstand the ongoing pressure. And Jasmine, despite her public composure, suffered nightmares and anxiety attacks that left her exhausted. Is it worth it? She asked her mother late one night. All this pain just because one flight attendant couldn't see me as a person? Kiana embraced her daughter. It stopped being about one flight or one person long ago. It's about changing a system that enables discrimination then punishes those who speak up. As the hearing's final day approached, Jasmine noticed transportation. Officials conferring with Patterson more frequently. Something was happening behind the scenes. Negotiations or new developments she wasn't privy to. The board members were deeply affected by your testimony, Patterson explained after one such meeting. Particularly Chairwoman Washington. She's requesting internal communications from Transamerican that they've been fighting to withhold. What none of them knew was that in a private executive suite across town, Richard Whitfield was issuing an ultimatum to Kiana's lawyer. Tell your clients to accept our settlement offer by tomorrow morning, or I'll personally ensure they regret ever hearing the name Transamerican. We have resources they can't imagine. Financial ruin won't begin to describe what happens next. The threat would prove to be Whitfield's most catastrophic miscalculation in the entire ordeal. The settlement offer arrived via courier at 7 a.m., $2.5 million with a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The document spanned 47 pages of legal language, but its essence was simple: take the money and disappear. This is life-changing. Money, Kiana acknowledged, staring at the figure. After months of financial devastation, the amount represented salvation: debts paid, education secured, grandmother's medical care covered. Eloise, visiting briefly from Milwaukee, had a different perspective. Blood money, she declared, pushing the document away. They want to buy your silence and preserve their system. I don't know, Grandma, Jasmine said quietly. We've fought so hard, but look what it's cost us. Maybe we should consider it. Patterson outlined the reality. The NDA prohibits discussing not just the incident, but the airline's policies, practices, and the evidence we've uncovered. You would be legally barred from ever speaking publicly about discrimination in air travel. They're not just buying your silence about this incident. They're removing you as a voice for change permanently. The family debate continued throughout the day. By evening, they remained divided. Kiana, exhausted by financial pressure and workplace ostracism, leaned toward acceptance. Eloise remained firmly opposed. Jasmine, torn between practical relief and principled stand, couldn't decide. I need time to think, she finally said, retreating to her room. Alone, Jasmine reviewed everything they'd endured: the initial discrimination, the public attacks, the financial hardship, the isolation. The settlement would end their suffering, but leave the underlying problem intact for the next young person, who didn't belong in first class. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Check your email. You need to see this before deciding. A friend. The email contained an audio file and brief message. Recorded yesterday in executive conference room. Multiple witnesses can verify authenticity. Jasmine pressed play and heard CEO Richard Whitfield's unmistakable voice. Once they sign the NDA, release the appreciation story about how we went above and beyond to resolve a misunderstanding. Marketing wants to spin this as our commitment to listening and improving. Legal says we can still pursue the defamation case against Patterson through backdoor channels without violating our agreement with the girl. Make sure the settlement language prevents her from assisting his defense. A second voice responded, and the policy review we announced publicly? A show for the Doughty, Whitfield replied dismissively. We'll convene a committee, issue a report, recommending minor adjustments, then quietly maintain appropriate cabin standards. Our premium passengers don't pay extra to have their experience compromised by social engineering. The recording continued with explicit discussion of using Jasmine's case to make an example of passengers who challenge crew authority, regardless of the circumstances. Jasmine's hands shook as she called Patterson, forwarding him the recording. After confirming its likely authenticity, he advised caution. This could be legally problematic as evidence, but it gives us insight into their true intentions. They have no plans to address the underlying discrimination. The settlement is purely about damage control. The next morning, Jasmine's decision was firm. No deal, she told her mother. They're not offering justice, just a bribe. Patterson arranged an exclusive interview with a respected national journalist. Without revealing the recording's contents directly, Jasmine explained her rejection of the settlement. Transamerican wants to treat this as an isolated incident rather than a symptom of systemic discrimination, she stated calmly. They're offering financial compensation while refusing to acknowledge the real issue. I can't accept money that allows this practice to continue unchallenged. She revealed the corporation's insistence on an extreme NDA. They don't just want me to stop talking about my experience. They want to prevent me from advocating for anyone facing similar discrimination. That's not justice. It's suppression. The interview went viral immediately. Jasmine Won't Be Silenced began trending nationwide. Civil rights organizations issued statements supporting her decision, and several corporate accountability groups announced investigations into Transamerican's practices. The airline's response was swift and harsh. Their PR team released a statement expressing disappointment that a generous good faith offer was rejected in favor of continued publicity seeking. More ominously, their legal department filed an emergency motion alleging Patterson had counseled his client to violate confidential settlement discussions. Behind the scenes, Whitfield made his most desperate move. A tabloid website suddenly published exclusive photos of Jasmine at a school dance, dancing closely with a classmate. The accompanying articles suggested she had a history of fabricating discrimination claims for attention, citing anonymous school sources. The smear attempt backfired spectacularly. Fellow students immediately recognized the photos as being from a supervised school function and came forward to dispute the anonymous claims. Several parents wrote open letters criticizing the exploitation of minors' images for corporate damage control. Meanwhile, the recording of Whitfield's private comments found its way to DOT investigators. Though inadmissible in court, it prompted expanded document requests that uncovered legitimate evidence of the same strategies discussed in the recording. Transamerican's board of directors called an emergency session. After 7 hours of closed-door discussion, they emerged with an announcement. Richard Whitfield had chosen to resign to pursue other opportunities. The company's general counsel and VP of cabin services were also transitioning away from the organization. The new acting CEO, Janet Murray, requested a meeting with the Wright family and their attorney. Unlike previous corporate representatives, she came without an entourage of lawyers. "I've reviewed this case thoroughly," Murray began. "What happened to Jasmine was inexcusable, and our response was worse. Rather than addressing discrimination, we attacked the victim. As a company, we need to acknowledge our failure and make meaningful changes." She outlined a comprehensive proposal: a public apology, termination of employees involved in discrimination or its cover-up, mandatory bias training, transparent complaint tracking, and establishment of an independent review board for discrimination claims. Additionally, the airline would create a transportation equity scholarship in Jasmine's name and pay fair compensation without requiring an NDA. "Is this genuine, or another PR move?" Kiana asked skeptically. "The board has seen the financial and reputational damage caused by fighting this case," Murray admitted. "But more importantly, many of us are genuinely appalled by what was revealed. Whether for moral or practical reasons, we need to change course." Patterson advised cautious engagement. "They're in crisis mode. This is when meaningful concessions happen." After consulting with civil rights organizations and transportation experts, the Wrights and their expanded legal team negotiated specific, enforceable commitments with concrete timelines and independent oversight provisions. The fight that began with one discriminatory flight attendant had evolved into an industry-changing settlement that would affect how airlines handle discrimination complaints nationwide. 6 months after the flight incident, Jasmine Wright stood at a podium in Transamerican Airlines headquarters. Behind her, a diverse group of executives and industry representatives gathered for the official announcement of the Wright Standards for Equitable Air Travel, a comprehensive set of policies and procedures designed to prevent discrimination and ensure fair treatment for all passengers. What began as a traumatic personal experience has transformed into an opportunity for meaningful change, Jasmine stated, her voice confident. "These standards aren't just about preventing discrimination. They're about creating a culture where every passenger is treated with dignity, regardless of their background." The settlement had been finalized 3 weeks earlier, following Transamerican's dramatic leadership change. Beyond substantial financial compensation, the agreement included structural reforms that would transform how the airline handled discrimination complaints. An independent passenger advocacy office would review all discrimination claims, bypassing the internal filtering system that had buried complaints from minority passengers. Transparent reporting would require publishing aggregate data on passenger complaints, categorized by race, gender, and other protected characteristics. Comprehensive anti-bias training would become mandatory for all customer-facing staff, with regular refresher courses and performance evaluations that included equity metrics. A diverse community advisory board would provide regular input on policy development and implementation. Most significantly, these Wright standards were being adopted industry-wide. The Department of Transportation had incorporated key elements into its new regulatory framework, effectively requiring all commercial airlines to implement similar protections. After the press conference, Janet Murray, now confirmed as Transamerican's permanent CEO, approached Jasmine privately. "You've changed this company in ways I wouldn't have thought possible," she admitted. "We had become so focused on premium experiences that we lost sight of basic human dignity. Thank you for forcing us to confront that failure." The victory extended beyond policy changes. Veronica Harlow had been terminated, along with several executives who participated in the cover-up attempt. The flight attendants union, initially defensive, had embraced the reforms after internal polling showed overwhelming support from members who wanted clear guidelines for equitable treatment. Miguel Ramirez had not only kept his job, but received a promotion to training director for the new inclusion program. "Your stand made it possible for people like me to work with integrity," he told Jasmine when they reunited. "You have no idea how many of us were silently cheering for you." For the Wright family, life was gradually returning to a new normal. Kiana had received multiple job offers and now worked as a diversity compliance specialist at a major law firm, with better pay and regular hours. Eloise had returned home, her health improving in the absence of constant stress. The community that had fractured under pressure slowly began to heal. Neighbors who had avoided them now offered congratulations. Local businesses that had banned them now displayed clippings about the hometown hero who changed the airline industry. Even Jasmine's educational journey had been transformed. Stanford University had not only maintained her acceptance but offered a full scholarship, impressed by the leadership qualities she demonstrated throughout the ordeal. The admissions director's note read simply, "We educate future leaders who change systems, not just navigate them. You've already proven you belong here." On a crisp autumn morning, Jasmine found herself back at O'Hare International Airport, this time for a very different flight. As she approached the security checkpoint, a TSA agent recognized her. "Ms. Wright, it's an honor. Some of us have been through the new training program your case inspired. It's making a real difference." She proceeded through security without random additional screening. At the gate, several passengers smiled in recognition. One elderly woman approached hesitantly. "Thank you, dear. My grandson is a young black man who travels frequently for business. Because of you, he might face a little less prejudice in this world." Boarding the aircraft, bound for Stanford, Jasmine was greeted by a diverse cabin crew who welcomed her warmly. In first class, where her scholarship once again provided a premium seat, no one questioned her presence or checked her boarding pass multiple times. As the plane taxied for takeoff, Jasmine opened her journal, the same one where she had documented the discrimination and retaliation. On a fresh page, she began writing about transformation and the power of perseverance. What had begun as a nightmare had become a catalyst for change that would affect countless travelers she would never meet. The aircraft lifted smoothly into the sky. Jasmine gazed out the window at Chicago receding below, her reflection in the glass showing a young woman forever changed by standing firm against injustice. The costs had been enormous, but so was the impact. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Proud doesn't begin to cover it. You've changed history, baby girl. Now go change the future, too." As the plane climbed through the clouds, Jasmine Wright, student, activist, policy changer, smiled at the limitless horizon ahead. The flight attendant approached with pre-departure beverages, offering her first choice with a respectful smile. Such a simple courtesy, one now extended equally to all passengers because one 17-year-old had refused to accept anything less. The story of Jasmine Wright teaches us powerful lessons about courage, resilience, and systemic change. First, it shows that individual acts of resistance, however small they seem, can spark transformative movements. When Jasmine simply recorded her mistreatment rather than accepting it silently, she created accountability where none existed before. Second, this journey reveals how systems protect themselves. Transamerican didn't just defend one employee's actions. They mobilized their entire corporate machinery to silence the truth. They used legal intimidation, financial pressure, character assassination, and community division as weapons. This systematic response exposed how discrimination isn't just about individual bias, but institutional protection of that bias. Third, Jasmine's story demonstrates the true cost of standing for justice. The Wright family endured financial hardship, health challenges, social isolation, and constant stress. These sacrifices highlight why many discrimination victims remain silent. The system punishes those who speak out. Fourth, it illustrates the power of unexpected allies. From Miguel's small act of kindness to David Chen's whistleblowing, these individuals prove that conscience can triumph over self-interest. Change often depends on people within broken systems choosing integrity over comfort. Finally, and most importantly, Jasmine's perseverance shows that systems can change when enough pressure is applied. The right standards emerged not because an airline had an ethical epiphany, but because one teenager refused to accept that discrimination was the price of admission to opportunity. In our own lives, we may face moments where accepting injustice seems easier than challenging it. Jasmine's story reminds us that the path to systemic change is difficult but possible, and that courage, while costly, creates ripples that benefit countless others we may never meet. What moment in Jasmine's journey resonated most with you? Was it her initial stand on the plane, her refusal to accept the settlement money, or another moment entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and tell us about a time when you witnessed or experienced discrimination and how it was handled. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that expose social injustice and celebrate those brave enough to fight it. These stories matter now more than ever as our society continues to grapple with systemic discrimination. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between speaking up or staying quiet when faced with injustice? Your experiences and insights could help others navigate similar situations. Please share them below. Thank you for joining us for Jasmine's powerful journey. May her courage inspire us all to recognize that small acts of resistance can create ripples of change that transform entire systems. Together, we can build a world where no one has to fight for the dignity and respect that should be everyone's birthright.